Hi, I'm Adam, the founder of Team Pando, your team's collaborative space for product requirements. Today, I thought it'd be a lot of fun for us to do a little bit of product work on Team Pando in Team Pando. So let's jump in. To start, I'm going to create a new project. We're going to call this Flow Editing. For now, I'm not going to invite any of my colleagues, but I'm definitely going to do that shortly. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and create the project. And for this, I'm going to put on my product hat. So I'm going to go ahead and use our Team Pando PRD template. And now let's talk a bit about the problem that we're trying to solve today. So the heart of Team Pando is our requirements understanding engine. And that's the piece of software that turns the requirements that you write in natural language into flows that you can visualize and understand and organize your entire team around. So right now we get great feedback about the accuracy of those flows. We get about 95% positive feedback. But if the flow that the requirements understanding engine creates is just slightly different from the one that you had in mind, today, the way that you go about changing that is you clarify your requirement. Our requirements understanding engine takes another crack at it and shows you the flow that you likely expected. But sometimes you just want to go ahead and change the flow directly. So that's the problem that we want to solve today. We want to actually make sure that you can directly modify the flows that we're creating to have exactly the product flow that you had in mind as easily as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this PRD. I'm going to be right back. And we're back. So let's take a look at the PRD that we put together. Like we spoke about, the problem that we're trying to solve here is after the requirements understanding engine creates a flow from the requirements that you write, we want to make it super easy to go in and make some small surgical changes to the flow that it created. So that's what we talk about here in our problem overview. If we jump into goals, we want to make sure that all of your ratings of the accuracy of the flows that we're creating significantly improve. Right, so we're already doing pretty well, but we want to make sure that you can create exactly the flow that you want. And we really want this to be delightful and fun and easy. We don't want flow editing to be the primary mechanism for interacting with flows. We still want to make sure that we are kind of requirements first, but we want to provide this as an option to make sure that you can have exactly the flow that you want. So that flows right into our non-goals. We want to make sure that we're not driving significant adoption for this feature. We actually want usage of this feature to go down over time as our requirements understanding engine gets to the point where it's just reading your mind. And for V1, we're not going to be suggesting alternative flows, but we're definitely going to do that soon. So let's go ahead and jump into the solution. So the primary user story that we want to solve for here is as a user, after your requirements are analyzed, you should be able to see the part of the flow for that specific requirement and really easily edit it. So we're going to go ahead and create the first flow that's going to help support that use case. So we're going to go ahead and add some requirements here. And this is going to be for the requirement view. All right. Now, our first requirement here is when users hover or focus in a, let's say, hover on or focus in a requirement view with a generated flow, they should see the option to edit the flow. And we want to make sure that if users tap on the edit option, open the flow editor. Great. So we can see our requirements understanding engine got that first requirement right. And here we can see the actual flow that we're thinking about. From the requirement view, you can focus or you can hover. That brings you the edit flow option. When you tap on that, you open up our flow editor. So now what happens in that flow editor? Let's add another requirements block to talk about that. We're going to call this the flow editing view. All right, so our first requirement is in the flow view, users can select a state or a transition. With a state selected, users should be able to. So we want to make sure that we can add and remove expectations and effects and delete the state. So let's take a look at our flow so far. In the flow view, you can select a transition, select a state. When you select a state, you can add expectations, remove expectations, add effects, remove effects, delete a state. Perfect. With a transition selected, users should be able to edit the transitions condition, add and remove expectations and effects, edit the source and target states, and delete it. Great. I guess one last thing that we want to add is users can create states or transitions in the flow view. Now, let's take a look at the flow that our requirements have created. So if we look in here, we start off in the flow view. From the flow view, we can do a couple things: create a state, create a transition, select a state, or select a transition. When we have a state selected, we can delete it, add expectations, remove expectations, add effects, remove effects. Similarly on the transition side. So I think this makes sense in terms of requirements that we want to look at. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump into Figma, and we'll take a look at how we can design all of the states that we just defined in our requirements. I'll be right back. All right, here we are in Figma, ready to design the flow that we just defined. So for this, time to put on the design hat. First, I'm going to go ahead and create a page for each of the flows, just something I like to do. So we're going to have our requirement view, and we're going to have our flow editor. So in the requirement view, I'm going to go ahead and open up Team Pando. You can see I already have our requirement view flow selected. Come into sync flow, and let's sync it. Great. So here we can see we created a frame for each one of the states that we defined previously. So we have a frame for our requirement view right here with the two events that we need to make sure that we handle, hover and focus. We have a frame here for our edit flow view where you can tap on the edit option, and then here's our flow editor. And then let's go ahead and jump into the flow editor. We're going to switch over to our flow editing view. We're going to sync this flow too. Great. So you remember in our flow editing view, you can select a transition, you can select a state, and here we can see all of the requirements that we defined for each one of these steps. So I'm going to go ahead and do a bit of design work, and I'm going to be right back. We're back, and I have some designs to share. So let's take a look at them. In our flow, we defined 3 states. So we had our requirement view, we had our edit flow option. So here you can see the edit flow option appear, and we had our flow editor. So these are the 3 states. Super easy to design because we had our requirements right in front of us, and all of the frames are already pre-created. So now we can go through and actually connect all the events that we defined in our flow to the elements here that represent those events. So I'm going to make sure that I have my requirement view flow selected, move over to link flow. And here I've created an element that I want to represent our hover event. So when you hover over this element, that's going to be the hover event that we defined in the flow. And when you focus on this element, that's going to be the focus event that we defined in the flow. And then similarly over here, when you tap on this edit flow button, that's going to be connected to the taps on edit option event that we defined in our flow. And now we're going to close Team Pando, and you can look at the Figma prototype that we created, where you actually are able to step through each one of these events within the Figma prototype itself. Great. So now we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the flow editor. So within the flow editor, which is the second flow that we defined, you've got your flow editing view, you have your transition selected state, and you have your state selected state, along with all the requirements that go along with each of those. So now we're going to connect each of these elements to the corresponding event with Team Pando as well. So we're going to switch over to the flow editing view. And here, when you select a transition, so when you click here, that's going to be connected to the user selects a transition event. And when you tap on a state, that's going to be connected to the that's going to be connected to the state selected event. Great. So now we've actually wired up all of the events that we described in our requirements. We have designs for every one of the states. And now we're going to make it really easy to go ahead and build what we just described. I'm back again, and this time I'm wearing my engineering hat. So as an engineer, I jump into the Team Pando PRD that my team and I worked on. I can really understand all of the context, and then I can jump into the flows that we defined that form our solution. So it's very helpful to be able to see this visualization, but I can actually jump into the walkthrough as I go to build this product now. So I can see step by step in our flow, what are the requirements that are relevant to that particular step? What are all of the Figma files that the team and I have worked on to define what the designs for that step should look like? And then really importantly, what are all the events that I need to be able to handle from this step? So since I have all of these events here, I'm not going to forget, oh, actually, I also need to cover the case where the user focuses on the requirement view, not just the case where the user hovers. So I can click in here on an event. I'm brought to the next step where I have, again, all the requirements, all of the Figma assets that I need. And I can come in and do the same thing on the next flow, on our flow editing view. And here I see, again, all the requirements that I need, all of our Figma assets. And then here it becomes even more helpful where I can actually go through and see for the transition selected state, I need to handle a whole bunch of events. So now I almost have a checklist where I can make sure that I've handled every single feature that we defined in the PRD. So that was a quick overview of building a product end to end, from product definition to design, all the way through the beginning stages of building, all through Team Pando. So now we're really excited to go and get to work on building this feature and getting it out to you as soon as possible. Thanks so much, and tune in next time.